A lot to think about there, very useful tools. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Paul Oliver, who has combined his passion for sport and social justice issues in his work for the last 20 years. He's managed communications, education and project teams and provided specialist strategic advice on sport, inclusion and discrimination issues to federal and state governments, national sporting organisations and the private sector. A man with the answers, I believe. So come on up. Thanks, Paul.
That's it for me, basically. Jules covered all of that. I'm serious. How about we do a few activities instead? So we'll put the arm up and do that circle thing, and that'll be my talk instead. Nah, she's very humble, and I have to do this down after Jules when I speak behind. She's very humble. I've worked with Jules on the One Netball program for the last couple of years or so, but she's been the heart and soul behind all of it. I look across all sports, my work, and it honestly is one of the best inclusion, community engagement programs that I've seen in Australian sport. So she, really should be congratulated for what she's done for Netball Australia. All right, the doctor bit. So you can see on the little graphic there, I'm a doctor of sport. So I'm not a sports doctor. Don't ask me to look at any injuries or anything like that. All my stuff, like a doctor, is analysing sport, looking at all the issues, contemporary issues in sport and the challenges. And one of the biggest ones at the moment, particularly, is around inclusion and diversity in sport. So what I'm going to do today, you'll probably hear a few, I'm not joking, you'll probably hear a few repeats of some of the lessons that I've learned on my inclusion journey, because I've picked up a lot of them from Jules along the way, working with One Netball and other projects. So it's my lessons on that inclusion journey, and it really is an inclusion journey, isn't it? You start, but there's no stop there. You just learn along the way of what you do. So hopefully to share some of that with you today. I'll fill you in on a secret from the start. Inclusion and diversity, you will make mistakes, and I'm living proof of that. I've made every diversity inclusion mistake you can probably make. And that's fine. We're all human, we make those mistakes. I worked at the Australian Human Rights Commission for about 6 or 7 years. And I'm back there now helping with their Racism in Sport program, Racism It Stops With Me program with sport. But I work with Graham Innes, the Disability Discrimination Commissioner. I remember a first meeting I had with him, and I walked in his office and Graham's got his guide dog underneath his desk. And I went straight in there and started ruffling the dog's ears up and said, "How are you, Sparkles?" He's going, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just playing with Sparkles." And he said, "Get away from that dog. It's a working dog." And I didn't know, but he said I probably could have put that working dog back 3 months from what I'd done of ruffling up its ears at that time. I didn't know. I learned from that experience and moved on from there. I've done it we did programs with LGBTI groups, and I left the I out. So there was no intersex in there. So the intersex groups wanted me suspended from the job. What else? I've ran the Human Rights Awards there. 300 people at the Sheraton, a lot of disability groups getting awards there, and forgot to book the ramp up for people to get on stage for the awards. So look, the message from all this is you can make mistakes in this area. If you do diversity and inclusion projects in sport, you will get success and failure in even doses. Mark my words with it. But similar to the message what Jules said, don't let fear hold you back from doing those projects. I've seen so many sporting organisations not get involved with things because they're worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. Is it cold? Is it non-English speaking? What should I say with these things? Will I offend someone? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. You may make a mistake, you acknowledge it, apologise, see what the right thing to do is and move on from there and learn that lesson from that stuff. So that's lesson number 1 with my things. Don't let fear hold you back from doing any projects, and particularly don't pat that guide dog, okay, if you see it. All right. Oh, green one. God, that's easy. So there's little Wiley. Please let him do his job. Don't feed or pat him. Actually, there's a program at the moment, education program from Guide Dogs, just about that. Don't pat the guide dogs. All right. And there's my message with that. Learn from success, but don't let it hold you back from those things. Similar slide to Jules' one there before. We do share slides with things. Look, the reality is, in this diversity inclusion space, that is our market there. We live in a diverse, multi-age, multi-gendered, multi-sexed, multi-ability society. Look at all the stats there. 1 in 5 with disabilities from 200 countries. Melbourne and Sydney, people born overseas, 25%, their parents born overseas, up near 50% now. So that's our market, and sports realise that's their market. And that's the message we sell to sports now. If you keep on that narrow, the male, pale, middle-aged as your market, then it's getting less and less and less all the time. You expand to those demographics then, and you're expanding to what Australia is these days. Ask yourself the question, does your sport or sporting organisation reflect those figures up there? Does it? Do you know? Have you asked your membership? Have you surveyed your membership to know that? What about your community? Have you checked your local community out and checked if it reflects those demographics? And that was one of the big issues with sports. They don't, and I surveyed across probably about 18 national sports. Very few of them keep stats on any of this stuff. Very few do research into what their market or demographic is. And my argument was, well, how are you supposed to know of what you're supposed to do in Indigenous programs or multicultural or disability if you don't know your demographic or who plays or the members of your sport? Few people know with Jules of when she went in at the start with the One Netball program, the amount of research that she did around the demographics of netball. It was almost like a thesis itself at the start of what she did to put together to get that pre-work around their sport and what was involved with it, because that led to the next step. They knew who their market was from there. So I guess that's the second lesson from me. Sports should be asking themselves their questions of that, of who is our demographic, who's involved with our sport, so you can get to know and do your programs around those different things. Get proactive with looking for the answers around those things. The next thing, the PhD I did was on sport, breaking down barriers, building bridges for sport. So I interviewed over 100 or so different people from state, national sporting organisations. And one of the most common responses I heard around, is your club diverse or inclusive? And the most common comment I heard is, yeah, sure, we're inclusive. Anyone can join. And I heard that, and you've probably heard that time and time again. To me, it's almost a default setting. Yeah, of course, anyone can join. We're inclusive. To me, that's waiting for people to come to you. That's not being proactive. It's not trying to understand the needs of those diverse different groups, which are all different, to join your sport. So I made the conclusion from that, we need to break down the barriers. We need to break down those fences. Otherwise, people have to jump the fence. You think of a sporting club. If I'm a young 16-year-old Muslim girl who's interested in playing a sport, soccer, I go to that venue and there's a big wide fence around the whole area. It's not real conducive for me to go into that club and say, how do I get involved? It's up for the people within the organisations and the clubs to come out and meet the bridge, go halfway, go to those groups and see what their needs are, see what the barriers are of holding them back from coming to the clubs, or they mightn't even know about the sport. I think you did research of ones from non-Commonwealth countries who hadn't played netball, didn't even know about the game. So there's the bridge, that's the gulf there. Otherwise, that quote, we must actively and intentionally include, if not the system will unintentionally exclude. Liz Broderick, Sex Discrimination Commissioner, made that quote. And that was related to gender issues, but it applies to all inequality issues, that quote. So the third lesson that I'd pass on from my journey with that is the words aren't enough. That we're inclusive, anyone can join, words aren't enough. They've got to be backed up by action and proactive action. There's one of my favourite quotes, it's a 19th century writer, Henry Thoreau, and he said, "The secret to happiness is a synchronicity between your words, your beliefs and your actions." And it is. You think of this diversity inclusion space, there's a lot of words, there's a lot of talk going on, or there's a lot of ticking the box going on. And you might even believe in that stuff. Yes, we should be more diverse. Yes, women, disability, they all should get a chance in that. It's getting to that next stage. It's getting the synchronicity between the three. So you get to the third stage of action from there, which is the most important one. All right. I don't know whether you can even read that. There's so many reasons. We should all know. And that's the point. I put so many up there because there is so many reasons of why we should value diversity. And there's stacks of them. My main one that I do around promoting diversity with sporting organisations now is go straight for the business case. So it's no longer the good corporate social responsibility, this is the good thing to do. What's in it for bottom line for an organisation? Then you'll get the key people to sit up and listen to these things. And have a look there. There's a stack of them there. The thing that gets me of working in this area for quite a while is we're still talking about why it matters. What are the reasons? We've known these reasons, particularly gender, for 15, 20 years now. We know that unless we do stuff, there's going to be, I think Diversity Council of Australia says there's going to be 70 years until there's equality. We know all this stuff. Reports come out every second week from different organisations. And yet it's the Paul Keating thing of you keep saying something and saying something and saying something until you annoy everyone and then say it one more time and then people might get it from there. How many times do we have to keep doing reports to get why the reasons matter with these things? We know these things. But for me, one of the most important reasons is difference. So there's a lot of talk around disruption with organisations at the moment. I'm not into the trendy words with those sort of things, but when it comes to diversity, disruption is an important thing because great minds don't think alike. It's a really old saying, we've always believed in it, but when it comes to diversity, particularly on boards, great minds don't think alike. You don't want 8 of me on a board all thinking the same thing. Because at the end of that meeting, you're going to get exactly 8 ideas of what the 8 same ideas of what we're supposed to do with something. And the other 7 blokes nodding, oh, great idea, that's perfect, I believe in that too. Because they've all come from the same background, the same experiences. There's none of that innovation, creativity in there. You want that disruption because you want someone from a different background or culture. Someone who's lived with experiences a disability, to put that into the conversation, to rock me and say, oh, maybe, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. You want that within a conversation. So the fourth lesson that I get from that, disrupt. We know the facts around this stuff. Push it to the next stage with these. Diversity inclusion should be seen as an opportunity, not a burden around these things. And like Jules said, the reality is I'm on 2 committees with grassroots sports. Diversity inclusion gets pushed back to about number 54 on the list after getting refs for games and who's managing the canteen and all those sort of things. That's fine, that's the realities of sport and what we've got to do, but you do need that lead, that push within sports, that inclusion, diversity is really important as well, and to push it up through that list. All right, so you've got a really good sport, you push for that disruption. You can have a diverse sport, but if discrimination and bias, vilification still occurs, then your inclusion isn't working. There's a classic summary or phrase to describe those. Diversity is the mix, so you can have a whole mix, people from multicultural backgrounds, good gender, good disability mix, good age, good socio-economic. But if it doesn't get on, if there's discrimination cases everywhere, then it isn't working. I think I've got a few questions on the poll one. Do you guys want to put those up? These ones are for you guys. So, does your organisation have a diversity and inclusion policy? So you can choose A, yes, everyone knows about it, or B, if we have one, I haven't seen it. And this isn't an MPP or a code of conduct, this is a diversity inclusion policy. Come on, come on. Come on, come on. What's that? Oh, okay, no worries. I will get them up there, but interestingly, even if it was high about the policy, it doesn't really worry me. I worked at the Sports Commission, worked at Play by the Rules, promoting all policies, code of conduct, member protection policies, inclusion policies. Policies aren't worth the paper they're printed on unless you make them live. They can sit at the back of a website or they can sit at the back of a shelf somewhere, but if all your members don't know your policies, what's the rights and responsibilities expected when you come into that organisation, then it's no use having one in the first place. The other part of that question is having targets or teeth with your policy. So you can have a policy, but if you don't have any measurements, if we want to reach here by this year, and if we don't, we're going to report on it, everyone will see, and we'll do something about it. Most policies have no teeth with them, so no one does anything about it. If it gets measured, there's an old saying, if it gets measured, it gets done. So if you have measurements around your policies, your codes, what you want done around your gender, on your boards, any of those different things, you're likely to get results and get things done from those. Oh, there you go. So you got policies, but most haven't seen those policies anyway. So, and again, what Jules said, those perception things. So just like having a poster around the club, I'd do that example of the wire around a club. So first I'd have a poster at the front in different languages, so I know straight away you're making an effort to be inclusive. The other one, I would put the policies in induction kits for people joining the club. So if I am from a different background, whatever, I can see straight away these guys take these things seriously. If something happens, yes, I've got to write a recourse for these things. There's a complaints process that goes with it there. But the whole sports industry, that thing of ticking a box with policies, is not worth the paper it's printed on unless we make those policies sing. All of this ties into diversity, inclusion, ties into leadership and culture of an organisation. So you see an organisational culture thing there. Cultures don't happen by chance. They're moulded from above and below. When I did the interviews with all these sports for the PhD, I asked them about culture. What's the culture of your sport? And to a T, all of them said, look, ask us 5 years ago, and our culture was, that's what it is. If you want to join our sport, you join it. If you don't like our culture, go somewhere else, join a different sport. All of them to a T said now, culture is one of the most important things they look at around, and integrity issues these days as well. But culture was one of the words, catchwords that all sports organisations at all levels are talking about these days. You can see there from the thing around structure, so you can structure that with your policies and rules. But a big thing around culture is those unwritten rules. You come into an organisation, this is the way things are done around here. It's not written down in our constitution, it's not written in our policies, but Bazza knows that. He's done it for 20 years and that's how we operate here. That's what a culture is. It's the way things are done around an organisation, the personality of an organisation. That stuff can be moulded positively, or that stuff can go off the rails. And then you've got the top side of it, the leadership side of things. So all of this side of things is driven by strong leadership. Again, asking all those sports organisations what makes a safe, fair and inclusive sporting organisation, about 70% of them said strong leadership. Strong leaders drive this culture. So for me, lesson 6 from this stuff, diversity inclusion shouldn't be an add-on. It needs to be embedded in the culture of an organisation. You can't just tick the box. In fact, it's an out. If you say, do you do diversity and culture? Do you do diversity and inclusion? Yeah, we do. That's that box ticked. It's not taking it to the cultural level and say, okay, how's it embedded in the organisation? How does the leader put that through everyone in the organisation so they know where they stand here within our organisation? So it must be driven from the top with your culture. One of the biggest things that I found, or biggest findings, I guess, from all my stuff with sport, you can have culture, you can have all policies, you can have all these things, you can have education, but at the end of the day, it's people who create inclusive, non-discriminatory sporting environments. It's not the rules, not websites, not policies, it's you. It's you at every training session, every coaching session, every board meeting. It's how you carry those values around respect, fairness, equity, and how you champion those within the organisation. Not just those ones. The big one for me is this one around empathy. So it's walking in the shoes of someone else, seeing the person first, those stereotypes or unconscious bias of what a person can or can't do. Empathy's the good one because it builds connections and it fosters that understanding. And this is where sport's been falling down recently with a lot of the integrity issues, is these things contribute to trust. And that's what sport's on its knees about at the moment, is people losing trust with it. I talked with Jules, women's sports, one of the few shining stories, good stories in sport at the moment. Because of all the other integrity issues happening in sport, people are losing that trust. And when they lose trust, the next step is you lose belief. You lose belief and then you don't do sport. You go do something else. The kids play the iPad or something else. So for these reasons, the fairness, equity, empathy, so important in sport to establish those trust issues and belief issues as well. But at the end of the day, don't rely on any of those other things. It's you. It's people that do these things and drive the success in the area from these things. All right, so enough of the hard stuff. On to some of the funner stuff. So these are some of the tips and some of the practical stuff, I guess, that you can take away, some of the good sites or apps or things that I've come across over the time. Like I said, I do with Netball Australia, but I do with the NRL, AFL Players Association, a whole range of other sports. And you work in this area and you see a lot of really good things that work and don't work. So just like Jules said, that sharing aspect. It's good, the top sports, they get a lot of money and people, resources and staff to do this stuff. But for me, it's sharing it across all sports, your smaller sports that mightn't have the resources to find out this stuff. So on that, trying to organise a diversity inclusion forum later this year in Melbourne for a lot of sports to just share this sort of information. So I'll keep posted with that information. But these, just a whole range of little tips that you might be able to take away from here. And the first one, it's a big tip. It's a way of doing inclusion. So when I was at Play by the Rules with Pete Downs, people might know now, who's running it fantastically, we looked at all the issues and barriers in sport for the different groups. So whether it was Indigenous, multicultural, disability, gender, any of those. And a lot of the issues and challenges seem to be the same. But we looked at sports, and like I said, particularly not the well-resourced ones, and you'd have an Indigenous officer, or you'd have a disability officer, or a multicultural officer, but you wouldn't cover the other aspects of that. It might be a person's really keen or got knowledge on that area, so you do disability only. Or you've got a small grant from the government, so you do gender only, and you don't cover all the other areas. So what we thought, we got our heads together and we researched, and there were 7 main areas that are in common for all sports really. So whether it was an issue for an Indigenous, gender issues, multicultural, if you got these 7 things right, then they were the key pillars around inclusion. You'd probably get inclusion done well across all those different areas. So it was attitude, getting the right attitude, looking for different opportunities, providing choices. Choices can be equipment, choices can be opportunities to get into positions, providing the right access, communicating all this stuff in different accessible ways as well, making partnerships, going out and seeking those partnerships and having good bedrock of policies in there. So 7 pillars of inclusion, it's on the Play by the Rules website. We've used it with, or Netball Australia's used it as their model of inclusion now to cover those areas and education around those. Swimming Australia's done the same now. And other sports are looking at it as well. So if you want to find any more info about that, it's 7 Pillars of Inclusion. There's a website with it to cover those main different aspects of that. Other areas that I find really easy, really cheap as well. Like I said, I work with Human Rights Commission with their Racism That Stops With Me program. Any sporting club can sign up for that. You'll get posters, you get your logo on your website. You can do any range of other activities. Those visual ones are so easy to join up and join those campaigns. And for me, from a different marginalised group in society, might see that, might see your poster, straight away I'll see your website with the logo and think, yep, they take these issues seriously. That's the sport for me. Well, that's the club for me. You've got your one in South Australia here, the Watch the Women one, about women on boards. You can play ones around homophobia, those sort of ones, rainbow laces. I'm on Our Watch, so violence against women and children. I'm on their sport engagement program. Any of those ones, any sports at any levels can sign up to those and be part of them. It doesn't take much time, doesn't take any cost, and they're a really good visual way of showing the values of what your organisation supports. Technology and apps. There's a whole range of beautiful ones out there. The one on the top left, Welcoming Cities website. So if you think you need a PhD or research to get the info on your community, you don't. You just jump on that website, type in the postcode of where your club is, and that'll give you a huge big map of all the different population groups in your community there. It'll give you religions, it'll give you backgrounds, give you whatever you want, and it's free. So straight away, one of those hard ones is made easy. You can jump on and see the demographics of community and then work for how you're going to reach them around there. Sports community is always good for templates around this stuff, inclusion, diversity. The Grants Hub I subscribe to, just to get any information on local grants or national grants, Sports Commission ones that come through. And usually there's a lot around Indigenous or multicultural grants that are going on. Inclusion Club, really good free resources around disability and inclusion. And the one at the bottom, the Welcome to Country app. So if you are speaking somewhere, really cool little app to say, okay, that's the traditional owners of that area, and I'll add them in and use that with my speech. The other thing is learn. You can't learn enough in this area. You've heard it as a consistent theme throughout today of knowledge, education, awareness, a lack of understanding. And that's what a lot of this is. Jump on the sites. That Project Implicit one has a little survey that you can do around unconscious bias. So you can do it around race, gender, disability. It takes 15, 20 minutes, but it can show you some of those biases you didn't even know you had there. I could go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And Play by the Rules while I'm at it, is the men protection training there. Really cool little courses that Pete Downs has put together around child protection, harassment, discrimination, that stuff. I can't tell you enough to educate yourself, to become a leader, to advocate around these issues for others. Very quickly, social media. Heard the arguments before. I know the negative side. English Premier League players had 13,000 complaints of racism against them last year. So it has its negative sides, but it has its positives as well. Women's groups have really utilised social media, Twitter, really well to gain a wider market for news and information and coverage. So if you're doing all these things, yeah, don't share it just with your own members, share it with everyone else. Let everyone know what you're doing. So that's basically it. I usually lecture on this stuff at uni, so it's really good to see a half-awake room at the end of the speech. Thanks a lot for your attention and time, and yeah, happy to answer any questions you got. But seriously, when I speak at these things, we know a bit about it, but we're not the experts. You hold a lot of huge knowledge and expertise. You work with the programs each different day. So when we do these sharing things, like, ask questions, but if someone's got a great thing that they've done, please share that as well. So it's not just a couple of us sharing the knowledge in the room, it's 200 of us sharing this knowledge here. All right, thanks a lot.
Great, thanks, Paul.